Good morning. As Clive says, I'm Paul Phillip, and I'm the Chief Executive of the SRA. It's really good to see so many people here today, indeed to see so many familiar faces. This is, as Clive has said, our 6th annual compliance conference. It's my actual 5th. I think the first one we had about 200 or 300 people there. Today we have we have 1,600 people registered for this event this morning. Now, of course, some of those won't make it, but I think it's very encouraging to see that actually people feel it's worthwhile being here, and hopefully at the end of the day, that will be confirmed. So, over the last 5 years, a number of things have changed, both in the market, in the legal services market, and at the SRA. And what I'd really like to do this morning, really perhaps for the next 15 minutes or so, is to take just some time to think about the distance travelled and to ask why we've travelled that way, and to spend a little time in terms of where to next. But firstly, as Clive says, I'd like to pay homage to my present chair, Enid Rollins. Enid's been on the board for 6 years. She's been the chair of the SRA for 4 years. So in many ways, she's overseen all of the changes at the SRA during that period of time. And I just want to say thank you to Enid in her absence. Our new chair is a lady called Anna Bradley. I know that Anna will be keen to engage with solicitors up and down the country during her tenure. She starts in January, and hopefully in the months and years ahead, you'll have the opportunity to meet Anna and to say something about what you think of the SRA and what you think of our regulation in general. So, I actually have only one slide this morning, but I'm standing here wondering how I get the slide on the projector. So I'm just going to pause just for a second to see if we can do that. Amazing, isn't it? I don't know how that happens, but I have one slide you're pleased to hear, so it's not death by PowerPoint. And what I'd like to do is just to take you through that in the next few minutes. Many of you have seen the slide before. It reminds us of our journey so far in the last 5 years in terms of changes to the way in which we regulate the profession. And looking back from my perspective, it's very much about a renewed focus on professional standards and core principles, the types of things which some people see as motherhood and apple pie, but from our perspective fundamentally underpin the practice of law as a solicitor. Independence, integrity, confidentiality, acting in the client's best interest, and above all, an adherence to supporting the rule of law and the administration of justice. And we all understand the challenges. So from our point of view, it's not right that 9 out of 10 people never use a regulated legal professional. So 9 out of 10 people, when they have a legal problem, they don't go to see a solicitor, they don't go to see a barrister, they don't even go to see a licensed conveyancer. They tend to not get access to any legal advice whatsoever. Why? Well, mainly because they think that law firms are unaffordable, they think they're inaccessible, they think they're a bit stuffy. They're not too sure that they can actually afford the services of a solicitor. And I think that's something that we've been trying very hard to make an impact in, and hopefully in the months and years ahead we'll do that. Global competition is increasing, there's no doubt about that. The prestige of English and Welsh law has to be actively nurtured. It needs constant vigilance, not least when tackling some of the issues that might impact on its credibility. And I suspect one of the key ones there is anti-money laundering and the part that the profession can play inadvertently or deliberately in relation to that particular agenda. Many of you will have realised that last week we had the FATF report. I would probably give us 6.5 out of 10 in terms of the UK's, or at least England and Wales, compliance, and therefore there's much more to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Competition in the UK marketplace is increasing. 25% of the UK marketplace is unregulated, and by that I mean that if I have a legal problem, I don't go and see a solicitor or a barrister, I actually go and see a legal advisor who's not regulated at all. And we think that's wrong, and we think that solicitors should be able to compete better. Other professionals, such as, and in particular, accountants, are entering the legal services market. And again, I'll come back to that because I think that's quite a significant development. Cybercrime never sleeps. the idea of dealing with money, whether it be in your personal life with your bank app or dealing with money in your client account or your office account through the internet is becoming increasingly tricky, and constant vigilance is required. And the march of technology and AI is ever persistent, offering both promise and risk as we move forward. And of course, the increased risk of competition for you has been something that the SRA has been keen to try and develop. And I'd like to pause on that because that's a bit counterintuitive here, standing speaking to over 1,000 solicitors to actually say that. And I'd like to explain why. So our reform programme has its genesis around 2014. Prior to this, the SRA had been pursuing a regulatory model that was essentially based on financial services. It had some features to commend it, but in early 2014, we changed direction quite considerably. Keeping the so-called risk-based approach, we published a policy statement. That policy statement was very much, and is very much, the backcloth to this particular slide and the journey that it depicts. We looked again at the Legal Services Act and the principles contained in it, and we asked ourselves what was really in the wider public interest and what should we, as a solicitors regulator, be doing about that. We needed to be proportionate, was the first conclusion. As a regulator, we thought there was much more to do, and some of the answers lay in less bureaucracy, less unnecessary rules. Bureaucracy and rules which of course cost time and money, and which by necessity you have to bill to your clients. And other bureaucracy and over-regulation led to much of our account rules changes, much of the reforms to obligations around accountants' reports and dealing with client accounts, as well as the direction of travel in relation to our new handbook, which I'll come on to in a second. A move away from a compliance and rules-based approach and a move towards a principled and professional principled approach, which I honestly believe is the right way forward. But those changes are only a fraction of the picture. In order that the cost reductions those changes bring about are passed on to clients, are passed on to consumers, are passed on to the public, we had to look at what we did in relation to the Legal Services Act obligation around about creating an open and a competitive marketplace for legal services. This was a bandwagon that was much echoed by the CMA in its Legal Services Market Investigation of 2016. They said that the market was not working well for consumers. Well, we had already come to that conclusion a few years earlier, and hence we agreed with them. And that led to much of the changes we are on the cusp of implementing, both here today, implementing this month in relation to our transparency agenda, and you'll be able to hear more about that during the day, and the introduction of the digital badge, and implementing next year in relation to our handbook reforms, and especially the ideas of changes to the way in which freelance solicitors can work and allowing solicitors to practice non-reserved activities. And let's be clear, what I mean by that primarily is that you can give legal advice as a practicing solicitor with a practicing certificate outside of an authorised law firm or embedded in a non-legal business, bundling legal advice, if you were, with other goods and services so that there's greater access to the public. So let's quickly look at the slide. I'm going to start with 2011. As I said, much of the change over the years is rooted in the Legal Services Act. And of course, one of the key changes it brought in was the introduction of the so-called alternative business structure. It's a bit of a mouthful, and in all honesty, if I could get it changed, I would, because I don't think there's very much alternative about the business structure other than the ownership model, that it's wholly or partly owned by a non-lawyer. But the fact is that there are now over 1,000 ABSs in the legal sector, and we regulate most of them. The initial concerns about ABSs have simply not materialised. There was thoughts that they would be unethical, that business people who are not lawyers might have a conflict between making much more of a profit and not adhering to the principles that I've already mentioned. But quite frankly, that just hasn't been our experience. There's no evidence they've fallen short of the high standards that we would expect of solicitors. But there is evidence that they are nimble, that they are innovative, and that they bring investment into the sector, which we think has to be a good thing. They're very much part of the legal landscape now. And many of you in the room will be working in or working with or perhaps even owning an ABS here today. Jumping to 2014, the next issue from my perspective was multidisciplinary practices. ABS has heralded the possibility of multidisciplinary practices, but our rules hadn't really updated, and therefore we needed to update our rules to make sure that proper multidisciplinary practices, that is, practices where lawyers and other professionals came together in business ownership, was the thing to do. There's a real opportunity here in relation to MDPs for all of you. The fact is that there's an opportunity to expand your client base and client offering, partnering with other professions, especially accountants in my view, cross-selling your respective client bases and beginning to see yourselves as true one-stop shops for professional services for small and big business alike. We now regulate the 4 big accountancy firms in the world as legal services providers in England and Wales. The new entrants to the legal services marketplace. Some are now extremely big law firms, and I encourage you to go back to your firm perhaps tomorrow and think about the opportunities that a multidisciplinary practice might give, an opportunity to think about expanding your client base to cross-sell into other types of areas. We think it's a good idea, and we hope that more people adopt it going forward in the future. 2015 saw our red tape challenge cut out a swathe of unnecessary bureaucracy. One of the early key changes was the removal of something called the separate business rule. The separate business rule prevented you and your firms from owning other types of businesses. Businesses like, well, you can name it, but estate agents or even undertakers that could help you diversify what you do. This is another key change from our perspective, which allows firms to own other types of complementary businesses to drive growth and the need for legal advice and drive profits for law firms. Again, I'd encourage you to take advantage of these opportunities and to think about how you can develop your business going forward. And again, in 2015, we moved to reduce the burden of submitting qualified accountants' reports, asking accountants to use their professional judgment and saving you time and costly administration. 2016 saw us launch our drive for innovation with a pilot and now a well-established innovation space, which helps firms with bright ideas to try them out with our consent. As you know, or hopefully you know, we now publish all the waivers that we actually give to such firms who are trying out new ways of providing legal services. And you can see those in our website. I do commend it to you. You can look at what other people are doing. You can think about whether or not that's the right thing for you, and you can develop your business moving forward. I'm actually particularly pleased that earlier this year the government awarded the SRA £700,000 from its Pioneer Fund to help us support the development of artificial intelligence that can assist firms in the sector to make it easier for people to access legal services. But my message, I suppose, this morning as far as this is concerned is that the times, they are definitely changing, to quote a Nobel laureate. These opportunities exist now. You should be considering how your firm can benefit now before the horse is bolted. And for the last few years, and indeed throughout 2019, we will be working on the major reform programme that we call Looking to the Future, essentially the review of our handbook or our rule book. We're now calling it our new SRA Standards and Regulations, and they'll be with us probably next summer. Far shorter, far simpler, far more accessible, and far more opportunities for solicitors and their firms. You'll be hearing more about that if you attend the breakout sessions today, more about the principles, the codes, and more about changes to the accounts rules. But we're tackling head-on a key issue that I mentioned a bit earlier, and that is the unregulated legal market by letting bona fide solicitors, properly trained, properly educated, properly regulated solicitors with a practice certificate, to work as practicing solicitors for the first time, making sure clients can access the best people who are best placed to help them, and those are solicitors. So the idea that we have 25% of the market that is actually delivered by non-lawyers, if I can call them that, This change gives you the opportunity as a practice solicitor to enter that market. It opens up new ways of working and new careers paths for solicitors, and hopefully will allow more people to access properly trained solicitors, even if those solicitors are actually embedded in a non-legal business and bundling legal services in the way that I described earlier. And looking ahead, of course, high professional standards start with the right training. They start with the right entry requirements into the profession. Our competence statement was launched in 2014. It gave us the platform to reshape how solicitors qualify, and the new solicitors qualifying examination is set for introduction in the autumn of 2021. It will give the profession, it will give employers and the public confidence that all aspiring solicitors have to meet the same high standards at the point of entry. We will be piloting this next year, and I have absolutely no doubt that the approach of introducing a centralised assessment process, regardless of the route of entry to the profession, whether it be a law degree, a non-law degree, and a conversion, whether it be a SILEX modular approach, or whether it be an apprenticeship, regardless of the way in which you get into the profession, this will improve standards. It will give greater confidence in the solicitor qualification, and it'll allow people who have come in through non-degree or non-graduate entry the opportunity to prove their worth to the profession and to the public. So, the next few years will keep us all busy as we bed in those changes. We will be doing a variety of pieces of research in the next couple of years to look at the potential benefits or the expected benefits that we hope to see, to make sure that they are actually happening, and we'll be publishing that research as the months and years progress. And of course, I suppose change doesn't go away, it kind of never stops. We have to look at other key areas such as Brexit, the dreaded Brexit. Well, there's a stall here today. We have quite a lot of preparation to do for the no-deal scenario, should that ever actually happen, and we're busily engaged in that at the moment. And we've still got a little bit of unfinished business around about the scope and the workings of the compensation fund, and indeed we have just consulted on professional indemnity insurance, and we're thinking about where we go from there. And then, of course, there are external change programs. That is imposed change, and the SRA itself needs to respond to those as well as you. The two obvious examples of those are GDPR and the ongoing obligations with GDPR, and anti-money laundering. I mentioned FATF earlier. I said that I thought it was about 6.5 out of 10. We're now working with and regulated by the Office of Professional Body AML supervision, a bit of a mouthful, OPPAS, as part of the FCA and all that we do, and all that you do in the AML area. I suspect, unfortunately, there will be far more change ahead in relation to AML, far more ways of trying to make sure we minimise the possibility of money laundering happening in the UK and the part that solicitors play in that, so I suspect to have better watched that space. I also mentioned earlier the challenges of cybercrime, both for you and for us. The obvious need to keep cash safe when doing business online. And then, of course, lastly, there's the march of the machines. The idea that artificial intelligence and the use of technology will change everyone's life in the coming decades, both in your personal and your work life. And how to keep up and thrive as a legal business will be part of our agenda moving forward, and you'll be hearing more from us in relation to that. If only the outputs of the research that I mentioned a bit earlier. So thank you for listening. It's really pleasing to see so many people here in the hall. There's a lot to keep an eye on. I hope that today provides you with some answers. If not, please do pick up the phone. Please contact us. Use our innovation space, as I mentioned earlier, and keep an eye on what's happening. I know that the SRA staff would genuinely only be too willing to help. And again, I hope you enjoy your day. I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in the margins of the sessions today, and thank you very much for coming. Good morning.